Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. In 1984, James Cameron's Terminator predicted a future where machines would wipe out humanity. Now, a recent report prepared by Gladstone AI says that AI poses an extinction-level threat to humanity. This report, titled Defense in Depth, was prepared for the US State Department. It's been in the works for 6 months now. Now, AI might seem to be like all technology. It's a double-edged sword. It has its benefits and its hazards, but it's the edginess of AI that has everyone worried. Will AI wipe out humanity? Joining me to discuss this today are Kanish Gaur, Siddharth Pai, Srinath Sridharan, and my colleague Sridhar Ramakrishnan in the studio. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. I want to start by asking you, Srinath, this point from the report, extinction level threat to humanity, and the US must intervene, it says. How worried should we be? Is it just scaremongering?
Sandeep, I don't know whether we should be worried about AI or US trying to regulate the global AI. I think both are equally higher risks there.
Right.
And in this reading this report, AI seems to be the new governmental clickbait, which would then give authority to governments, especially the US government, as the report wants it, to kind of do almost what it wants to do.
Right.
But again, let me step back. Yes, AI is worrying, but then that's known. So is climate change. We have not done anything about it. So was AIDS when it was first discovered. We have kind of overcome that. And so is malaria in large parts of the globe.
Right.
So I think the human's ability to forestall a doom from risks is what governments have to worry about. But my fear is, I think we are kind of using AI as a broad brush to almost include everything, which includes government's incompetence as well.
Right, right. It's a sweeping, a bunch of things that you've mentioned, threats, Sri, the fact that, malaria, AIDS, you didn't mention the pandemic. And of course,
climate change as well.
Climate change as well, right? Do you think we're making too much out of this, that the AI scare? Is it something like Srinath was saying, it's to scare people and get the government to step in and regulate this technology?
So, Sandeep, this is not the first report that's warning us of that humanity will be wiped out by AI. And I suspect it won't be the last report that comes out. Right. In fact, if you remember when the dust up at OpenAI happened in November last year, I had actually written a blog for our website, news9live.com, where I had suggested that there should be a pause on AI while the governments actually factor in and look at what's really happening. That was a time when the US administration had issued an executive order asking the companies developing the frontier models to submit their applications for testing, right? And one of the reasons why the whole drama played out at OpenAI at that time, I suspect, Sandeep, was the very issue of artificial general intelligence, which is the holy grail for the AI industry in some sense. Because right now, what we witnessing with the generative AI is essentially a smart system, but it's not anywhere close to human intelligence.
Yeah, it's a chatbot.
Literally, it's a predictor of the next word.
Yes.
That's what it does.
Right.
So with AGI, what we'll see is machines capable of beating human intelligence.
Right.
At that point, how will these systems behave?
Yes.
Will they even be in control of human creators?
Right.
That is, I think, the big question. And for years now, at least since 2020, when AI and generative AI reach some sort of a tipping point, there are a lot of independent voices that have been emerging across the world who have been voicing this concern about the risk of AGI to humanity. So I suspect there is some concern. We should not dismiss it outright.
Right.
We definitely do need guardrails as far as AI, software and AI applications are concerned, because we've already seen there are many instances of what even something as simple as generative AI can do in the hands of people who want to cause problem. Right. So it's like any other weapon. This can be weaponized, very easily. So I think the current state of AI, will that make humanity extinct? I don't think so.
Right.
But is it reasonable to expect that we may reach a time when AGI actually becomes too powerful and beyond the control of its human creators? I think that's quite possible.
It's quite possible. And in fact, Siddharth, I want to bring you in on this because you're looking at the industry very closely. You know, this report mentions, I mean, all the words that Sri mentioned, especially WMDs, that figures very prominently in this. Do you think it's a little too early to be crying wolf in the case of AI, or is it, as Sri mentioned, is it a threat in being? Is it something that we really need to be worried about? Especially these frontier labs that are pushing technology, you know, the kind of human-like capabilities that they want to give AI. What are your thoughts on this?
No, I think so. Innovation has always outstripped regulation. I think the greatest example of this is what's happening with AI as of now, where even the regulators and governments across the world are trying to figure out how exactly do we regulate this? How does copyright law, patent law, agency for that matter end up actually coming? It's become this sort of massive black box that nobody can end up figuring out. Even the creators of these systems for that matter, even Google DeepMind has said, we have no idea how it actually does the things that it does. It can at best give you a possible theory, but we have no actual explanation for the same. So it has actually become an imminent issue that is there for that matter. Now, what becomes important over here is in the absence of any specific laws, if there is misuse of AI, how can that misuse actually be prosecuted as of now? We have actually seen that in this particular year, especially for that matter, there are no less than 34 different countries, I believe, across the world who are actually undertaking general elections as of now, let alone the local elections, state elections, etc. And we've seen the rampant level of AI-generated content and the Gen AI output that's actually flooding the entire world. Deepfakes have actually become a part and parcel of daily vocabulary. So how do we do that? How do we trace it? How do we inform the public as to how to discern between something that's AI-generated versus something that's actually written as of now? There would actually be larger consequences at stake. So is it a very alarmist view that they've actually put about? I believe they've actually used shocking language just because the world is actually desensitized as of now and needs a kind of shock. But there is an urgent and imminent need for regulators and innovators to actually come onto the table and figure out a paradigm that can end up actually regulating and sort of governing what this ends up happening. In the absence of that, nobody can wait for misuse to end up happening. And some of these, mind you, will have real world ramifications. If you end up actually seeing a tweet or a manufactured video of the CEO of a listed company actually making loose statements, stock prices fall. If you recall when X, which was previously Twitter, allowed people to end up taking blue ticks without any verification, Eli Lilly stock fell because some guy paid $8 and he actually managed to wipe out $23 to $24 billion of value at an instant itself. So we do need regulation. It's not as alarmist making out to be, but time is actually of the essence as of now.
Time is of the essence. And in fact, before I ask Kanishk about regulation, I'm going to read out these words that you mentioned, Siddharth, from the report. I mean, I haven't read a report that's come out from a government agency with these kind of words. Catastrophic, weapons of mass destruction, superhuman AI, weaponized AI, human extinction, complete loss of control over AI, and finally, national security risk. Sounds like the WMD report from the Iraq war, Sri. I mean, it's a bit like that, alarmist. But, I want to ask Kanishk about the regulation of AI. Kanishk, even as we speak, the European Union is trying to put in some regulations, and they're, of course, the first to jump into regulating new tech, and, they have the strictest data privacy laws. What's your take on this? What can we expect the EU to do in the case of regulating AI?
The view which is taken by EU is very different from what the US government is trying to do.
Yeah.
The EU view is more focused on building ethics, building more trust, whereas the US view is typically having more governmental control, right? But when it comes to India, we need to have a larger mixed framework. Neither government alone can control AI because they are not developing AI. How can you control something which you're not developing? So what is required is partnership with the industry, partnership with the academia, partnership with civil society and government. All of them need to work together towards it. When nuclear energy was first discovered, we always said nuclear energy is going to destroy the world.
Yes.
But have we stopped using nuclear energy today? No. We are still using nuclear energy for civil as well as for military use. The only thing is that we have built guardrails and we have built international organizations like the International Atomic Agency, which regulates and checks any harm which nuclear energy can cause to the world or control the weapon of mass destruction. So a similar setup is required today.
Right.
One, for one organization within the country to regulate, control the use of artificial intelligence and not multiple organizations. And this one organization to talk to a global organization.
Right.
So neither the US government should control AI, neither the EU should control AI. There should be a global body under the UN Charter that should look at regulating AI,
Yes.
which should talk to different parts of the world.
Right.
That is the need of the hour. The innovation in AI is coming from US companies. It is companies like Meta, it is companies like Google, it is companies like Microsoft, which is giving obviously a lead for the US government to move forward and say, hey, we can regulate AI better than anyone else.
Yes.
But this technology is being used globally. Its implications across the world are going to be so different. So no single government can control AI. No single association of government, which is EU, can manage it because it is going to divide the world.
Right.
Democracies like India will have a very, very important role. So how AI plays out in India is going to be equally important because we are the biggest suppliers to both EU and the US. So industry partnership with the government is required locally, and a UN level convention is required for regulating and managing AI. You need to build out different guardrails, and you
Right.
also need to bring out audit mechanisms. Audit mechanisms could be self-audit mechanisms, third-party audit mechanisms, also red team, where you are red teaming the AI.
Yes.
If something bad happens, how are you going to ensure you are able to control it? Red teaming mechanisms on AI have to be built in so that the bombs on AI can't be created, which could create havoc in social media or which can cause havoc on chemical systems or nuclear power plants.
Right.
All that has to be thought from a national security, from a people security lens, and also from a democratic lens. Because, mind you, there are elections globally,
Yes.
election interference. How are you going to control all of those? So those are important areas that need to be considered.
Absolutely important areas.
So
And
two things I'd want to add to this conversation, Sandeep. One is that in the good old days, or rather the good bad, like the bad old days of nuclear arms race, every
Yes.
country was, racing to
Absolutely.
develop its own nuclear missiles and capabilities. So now the new race is, of course, the AI race. So
AI
every
race.
country has its own AI vision and path
Right,
they're heading to.
right.
Now, as far as the need for an international agency or government cooperation,
Yeah.
on paper we already have something like that.
Yeah.
But the problem with that setup is that nothing that comes out of that is binding on any other member states.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's pointless.
Right.
Like you can say, okay, these guardrails need to be there, but if India or let's say US or Germany or Japan decides, no, we're not going to listen to this, we need our own AI
Right.
Roadmap,
Absolutely.
then it's pointless.
It's not binding. It'll be like a UN resolution. right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not binding or
so
anything.
that's something.
Right.
Now, the other point which our speaker also made here is that about the red teams.
Yes.
So what US has done in the October executive order, which the Biden administration passed,
Right.
they actually directed their national standards authority
Yeah.
also to come up with certain testing standards for these AI applications. So these standards would be applicable for any frontier model that's being developed.
Yes.
And the government would then test these models for safety, especially from a user point of view.
Yeah.
So that is very important. So the big difference between the EU approach to AI and the US approach
the
is
US.
that the US is
Diametrically
very
different.
focused on the consumer, the end
Yes.
impact of that technology on the consumer.
Right.
Whereas EU has taken a different route, saying that
Yes.
okay, there'll be a light touch regulation on something which we deem is like not very serious,
Right.
and a much more a deeper scrutiny on something which we see is going to have a greater impact on people and privacy and all those issues.
Right.
So those are two different approaches which are in play right now.
Right, and but see, this point that Kanishk made, the fact that we aren't really developing very much a lot of AI, right? I mean, it's pretty much
Absolutely.
a monopoly of the United States
Right.
at present. But what is it that we need to really do to kind of stay ahead of the curve? Could we, for instance, set up a AI ministry, as some were suggesting?
So, Sandeep, as we know, setting up a ministry is never the solution.
Right.
Because we are talking about fundamental innovation.
Yeah.
And AI is not a cheap
Regulating
industry.
AI, how do you regulate something like this as double-edged as AI?
So, it's a fine line you have to walk in
Yeah.
terms of, do you want to crush innovation? Because then you become like a Stone Age country.
Yes.
Right? If you don't allow the AI startups in India to actually experiment
Right.
and build on what the platform others are doing,
Yes.
then you risk like setting the country back by tens of, and this is a time when we can't afford to be set back by even 2 years in my mind. Forget about 10, 20 years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think we have to walk a fine line between how much regulation do we need, what kind of regulation do we need,
Yes.
and what are the freedom we need to give startups, especially in the AI space, to innovate.
Right.
So there is no easy answer, but I think it will come from trial and error. And as Kanishk also said, I think there has to be consensus at a global level,
Right.
and once you arrive at a consensus, then it has to be like enforceable at state levels. Whether that sort of consensus is possible is the big question.
And I clearly remember the kind of controversy that arose when Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar put out that notification, and immediately the entire industry came up in arms. So, and I think the government kind of backtracked on that. They said it's going to be applicable only to startups and not to the established, giants. But Srinath, this point about regulation, how does the government kind of regulate this industry? Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar has said that you can expect a new regulation by June or July. What can we expect in that? What would the government kind of put out?
See, I think the government kind of from last April to now has changed its mind. Minister first said he wants to be setting up guardrails because they're far more nimble and agile. And then within a month, he changed his mind to say that we need to do regulations. And I'm seeing it is in conjunction with India also participated with 40-odd countries in the UK summit around AI.
Right.
And my belief is that governments, as much as they say that they want to collaborate and cooperate with each other, are going to fight for AI supremacy. The reality is the 21st century industrialization is around emerging technologies.
Yes.
AI is already a $15 trillion business.
Absolutely.
And it's not surprising that US has come with a narrative like this, and more would come in.
But Srinath, the guy who seems to be really ahead of the curve when it comes to predicting AI is Vladimir Putin. You remember that statement from 2017 where he says that anyone who controls AI will rule the world.
Yes.
And that was 7 years back, before all of this generative AI stuff that we're talking about today.
And that's precisely the reason, as Srinath also said, why we'll see very little cooperation on this, because everyone wants to win this race, the AI race, whether it's China, US, Russia, or even India now.
Right. It's an AI arms race, very clearly.
Absolutely.
It's just like what the world was like in 1945, and that seems to be the world of 2024. Everyone's racing to develop it, and I'm just trying to think if there were any regulations, whether there was any debate around nuclear weapon usage in 1945, where people said this was the thing that could. We have Robert Oppenheimer's quotation of the Gita, of course, in that. But Siddharth, new arms race developing, a new AI arms race?
100%. I think for AI also, for that matter, a large amount of the code is also getting circulated amongst open source systems and the like. And the data sets also, there's a large amount of open source data sets that are available. And the compute power as of now is actually easily accessible to cloud service providers. So you don't need to actually invest into the infrastructure as well as the hardware to end up actually doing it. That's why you've seen the number of Gen AI startups and AI startups proliferate over time. What we are actually seeing is it may no longer be a nation versus nation war. You will have citizens within that who may end up actually using this particular AI against financial institutions in that nation, against hospital infrastructure and the like. We've seen the number of crypto ransomware attacks that happened a few years ago also for that matter. So it is something that can actually be misused on the same. I'm fairly certain that there are governments across the world who are actually training this for military purposes as well as offensive and defensive capabilities itself. So this arms race is not an arms race amongst nations. It's amongst nations, amongst businesses. It's amongst people. It's amongst almost every facet of society who can end up actually using these particular systems. There's a large economic model that can be generated out of here. The offensive capabilities can end up actually crippling the technological infrastructure of any nation, of any institution itself. It does actually become very, very powerful and potent. Unless we have a global compact, an entirely new way of looking at it, existing regulations and regulatory mechanisms and regulatory thought process will fail when it comes to regulating something as sophisticated as artificial intelligence. We do actually need a new global compact and new global paradigm. This thing of give us your data on a pen drive and we'll validate it. You cannot. Even the creators can't actually figure out what happened. So what sort of tests are you going to actually use? It becomes easy for the AI to actually realize that a test is actually being done for some sort of surveillance code to exist, to end up actually doing it to that test. Volkswagen did it during the pollution scandal. How hard is it for this kind of software to end up actually realizing it's being tested, fool the tester, and then end up doing whatever it wants to thereafter? That does actually exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the crazy stories I just want to add to make that point is that someone recently, in 6 hours managed to generate a list of more than 4,000 toxins, which is like worse than the nerve agents available today.
Right.
In just a matter of 6 hours, they had new molecule, new candidates that could be more potent than your nerve agents that exist today.
Right, and the point that Siddharth made that it's possibly going to be used in combat is already being used in combat.
Absolutely.
The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are using it for targeting. The Ukrainians are using it for surface vessel attacks against the Russian Navy. So AI has already crept in the first version of it. It's an arms race, an AI arms race. And Kanish, since a lot of this is it has eerie parallels with the nuclear arms race. Do you see a kind of NPT for AI evolving, where you'll have nuclear haves and nuclear have-nots? You would have, generative AI haves and generative AI have-nots. You're going to create a small club of guys who have this, the crown jewels of AI.
Specifically in sectors where there could be, misharm, it could impact people's safety, it could impact elections. You will have to develop mechanisms where you are controlling the AI doesn't become up to the next level.
Right.
If you get super intelligent AI, it will not rely on human feeds. It will do what it believes is right, and it is going to interfere in your elections. It is going to impact the human life. What you need to control is where are these systems, and what is the level of guardrails you are building against these systems. These systems need to be identified first. So who is doing that discovery exercise? Right? That is something that needs to be focused on right now, rather than making statements saying that AI can end the human life or it can erase us. The whole aspect is about how you build out these processes, how do you build out more auditing mechanisms. You identify industries and sectors where AI should be allowed freely so that innovation can happen, startups can grow, and you identify sectors where criticality can be defined. So your thresholds, your levels need to be defined across sectors. That's why I said a single ministry will not be able to govern it. Today in India, we've got multiple bodies which are working. We've got the PM Economic Advisory Council. We've got the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office. MIT is doing. All of them need to collaborate. You might require an AI ministry. If you go to UAE, United Arab Emirates, they have an AI minister, they have an AI ministry. Right? That's innovation. That's something which is need of the hour. And I can tell you, as we move forward, the majority of the nations will have a separate ministry on artificial intelligence because it is going to impact so many other departments across the government that it is going to be paramount, because you will have to look at safety, you will have to look at democracy, you will have to look at skilling as well. So it has both connotations, right? How you keep people skilled, how you ensure the jobs don't die out. Those are also going to be important mechanisms. And similarly, a regulatory body. Like you've got SEBI, you've got RBI, AI regulatory body which comes in, audits different business functions or industry to say you are safely using AI. That is going to be the future, and that is something which is the area where work needs to happen as we move forward.
So Sandeep, to your point on NPT, I think AI is going to be far more difficult to control. I'll tell you why. Because one, with nuclear technology, the technology was available only to a handful of countries. Now, a badly made nuclear bomb, the first victim would be you. Right? It's going to blow you up first. Of course. And when you see a bomb, and when it explodes, you know what kind of devastation it's going to cause. Here, there is no visible devastation as such. It's happening. It's all at a very insidious level. A deep fake is a deep fake until you really, realize it's original, until you realize it's fake. Right? So AI, the way it's going to, build itself, worm its way into our lives, is going to be far more insidious than the bang of a nuclear, weapon.
Absolutely.
So which is why it's going to be far harder for humanity, one, to realize the gravity of the dangers of AI, and then to do something serious about it, and for people to come together to agree that we need to address this. That is what is going to make AI a much more dangerous technology for humanity to handle than a nuclear technology.
Yes, in fact, that's what this report as well it says. It says that they need to set up mechanisms to basically be alert to Skynet actually emerging out of the machine. Skynet is, of course, the self-aware machines of the Terminator. And I just want to quickly poll my panel of experts here. When do you think this Skynet thing, if you can call it that, machines would start to become self-aware. By this decade, by the next decade, there are a lot of predictions that it could take up to about 2 decades. But what's your guess?
I would like to differentiate between consciousness, the sentient being, and intelligence.
Right.
I think you can be intelligent without being sentient, without being conscious.
Right.
If you take simple organisms in nature, they're intelligent, but they're not necessarily conscious the
sentient,
way you and I are as human beings. So could we create machines that are intelligent in that fashion without having a soul or without having emotions? Absolutely possible. And that's where the danger lies. So which is why I think a lot of people tend to poo-poo this whole concern over AI, AGI, saying that, oh, but they're never going to become sentient. Maybe not. But they'll become intelligent enough to take control from the people who created it, the masters. That's quite possible.
Sentient, Siddharth, sentient machines, a possibility this decade? Or
I think sentient machines will most probably come in by the end of the 2040s, for that matter. That may actually be sufficient time for these things to end up actually develop to reach that. But I think just one bigger point on the regulation part. We've spoken a lot about governments regulating it, but we also citizens need the rights to ensure that the government does not end up actually using AI against its own citizenry. If you look at any of the dictatorships across the world, that's actually one of the biggest means of actually doing that. People have said that China has actually been creating this entire surveillance system. Imagine if that's actually by AI, for that matter, that will actually become far scarier. So late 2040s for sentience, but much before that, citizen protection from government is actually a greater need of the hour as of now.
Right. And Kanish, this point about governments and the people, the Great Firewall of China was mentioned here. Of course, China doesn't have to bother about elections, but we are a few weeks away from a national election, a general election. What is the possibility that AI would be used, given the fact it's already been used across the world? You have it been used in Argentina for the first time, both parties using it. And let's not forget Imran Khan issuing those statements from prison, where AI-generated voice, speeches of his were broadcast. What is the disruptive potential of AI in the Indian elections coming up? Is there anything that you're really worried about?
I am absolutely worried about deepfakes impacting user sentiments in Indian election using AI, right? So a big onus is on Election Commission of India, how they regulate. The campaigning is going to stop 48 hours before the election, but the campaigning never stops on social media.
Right.
And if the campaigning comprises of deepfakes, if it comprises of fake news, misinformation, it is going to impact people's sentiment.
Right.
Which is the big ask. So the regulatory body, which is Election Commission of India, has a very important role in terms of ensuring free and fair and democratic elections to happen in India as we move towards the Lok Sabha election.
Right. Very important point there. Campaigning stops, but social media campaigning is on perpetual mode.
Absolutely.
And you think, Sri, there's a reason to regulate this? The Election Commission needs to kind of step in and stop social media campaigning? Others?
So the great advantage and why social media is a lawless land in some sense, Sandeep, is the fact that there is no KYC on most of the platforms. There's anonymity.
Right.
You can, who do you go after?
Right.
If someone breaks the law, who do you go after?
Yeah.
So that's the great advantage of social media, right? I mean, which is why social media was called the weapon of mass destruction before AI came along.
Right.
Because AI is now the new WMD.
Right. Absolutely.
So it's very hard to control social media, and it's going to be far harder to control AI, especially AGI.
AGI, and especially with the elections, Srinath, you see this as a problem with deep fakes, the kind of deep fakes that are proliferating. Political parties have been using it benignly, of course. In Tamil Nadu, there are a lot of political parties without leaders who are kind of using AI to bring their leaders back to life. But you see a deep fake assault on the voters or other political parties in the upcoming elections.
See, I've always believed that politicians and the political systems are far astute understanders of technology.
Right.
I mean, you look at the narrative.
First
the last
adopters
10
of technology.
years. Yeah, I mean, the way the elections and the narrative and the digital media, or how various politicians have adopted X, Twitter, or using data sciences for predictive analysis and what will work and what narrative, including what messaging to give. So the politicians understand, or at least bring in experts to understand this, because it's a large narrative at stake for them.
Yes.
And also, we must accept that as a society, we believe in, I think the entire narrative of social media is thanks to all of us, because we are very happily voyeuristic and narcissist. I mean, that's a genesis of social media business model itself.
Right.
That we love to say what we are saying, and we want to know what others are saying.
Right.
And I think that's itself, it's a weapon of mass destruction for a political leader.
Right.
I mean, they get pulse on the people very easily. So AI, by the way, my belief is we have been using it in BFSI and other sectors for the last 30 years plus.
Yes.
On our mobile phones, we're using it right from GPS, Google's, and everything.
Right.
So it is not as if AI is going to come in and change our world, but it's going to accelerate the way how I would want to probably call it as an AI and digital addiction.
Right.
That it's going to change our lives far more impactfully than we can even control our narrative. It's probably worse than an opium or a cocaine addiction.
Worse than an opium and cocaine addiction. In fact, when AI burst on the scene last year, we began this series called The Dark Side of AI, strangely looking at all the fears that our experts here have spoken about, including the assault of deep fakes. Let's take a look at that series, The Dark Side of AI.
President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
Did President Obama say those things? No. But it looks pretty realistic. It's a realistic video because it's called a deep fake.
Will you believe everything I say? Because how do you know that it's me, a real person, and not an artificial intelligence bot or avatar? Now, unfortunately, while at one end we've seen artificial intelligence really doing things that were unimaginable, it also has a slightly darker side, and the dark side comes from deep fake, which not only impersonates the face of a person and the actions of a person, but also the voice. And with that, it becomes a very difficult environment to navigate because you don't know what you are seeing is real or fake.
There might be certain public figures that it should not edit. There might be certain contexts that it should not edit. We can think of these scenarios. So if we are a degree ahead and visualize what these tools would do, or what if these malicious guys get an access to these tools, what could be the possibility that they do? I think the game is there, That is where we'll have to kind of build systems around these generators. So at source only we control this. And then the access to deepfakes. What kind of video am I processing? Is it of a public figure? Is it a too personal video about anyone? Such checks and balances have to be there.
The NBA trusted me with the next generation.
Recently there was a very weird news I read, entirely plausible, but it talked about talking to the dead. How do you do that? The same deep fake, they have taken your dead relative, your close relative, it could be the parents, it could be anyone, and they make a deep fake video of that person and then feed within artificial intelligence so that person is having a conversation with you. But some other people seem to like it, but technically this is possible and this is happening.
During Ukraine war, wherein the hackers using the AI technology beamed a video on a popular news channel where the president of Ukraine was shown appealing his citizens and soldiers to surrender to Russians. There have been instances of, Pentagon has been bombed, kind of AI enabled or AI generated pictures have been shown on internet or channels. So these kind of things, when you try to analyze the event around what is happening, around that time, try to cross check the facts, then you can come to know about the reality. But if a common man, he sees these kind of things, then they can be tricked into believing, yes.
I'm particularly worried about the scope for disinformation using AI, particularly in the defense architecture. Those systems are eventually penetrated by deep fakes and by artificial intelligence. It could result in a lot of chaos.
Now obviously deep fake technology poses significant dangers and to the world and to India as well. And imagine when you're at the cusp of election season, featuring a fairly influential political leader from a party that you follow and perhaps an opposition, where it becomes very difficult for you to understand given the polarization and the confusion, where something that actually came into your social media feed was actually never said.
We have seen how algorithmic biases can perpetuate discrimination and prejudice, and how the lack of transparency can undermine public trust. The words were not mine, and the audio was an AI voice cloning software trained on my floor speeches. The remarks were written by ChatGPT. The audio and my playing it may strike you as curious or humorous, but what reverberated in my mind was, what if it had provided an endorsement of Ukraine surrendering?
A classic example of artificial intelligence-powered voice cloning, really. In a US Senate hearing on AI, artificial intelligence, Senator Richard Blumenthal's voice was actually cloned to really try and drive home the dangerous possibilities of unregulated, unrestricted AI advancements. In response, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, acknowledged these very dangers of the technology.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong. And we want to be vocal about that. We want to work with the government.
AI will have to be regulated. The quicker, the better. And once you miss the train, you'll always be in catch-up mode. Right now, different countries are in a race. But as our experts have just told us, prompt AI regulation is the need of the hour, because getting the genie back into the bottle will be very difficult. I'd like to thank all of you, Siddharth, Srinath, Kanishk, and my colleague Sri for joining me this evening.